The morning started like absolute chaos. Jessica's phone had been ringing nonstop since 5 in the morning, and by the time she finally dragged herself out of bed, her entire world felt like it was falling apart. The company's main servers had gone down during the night, and every single minute they stayed offline meant losing thousands of dollars. Her tech team was scrambling, her investors were panicking, and she needed to get to the office immediately. She threw on the first clothes she could find, which happened to be an old pair of jeans with a rip in the knee and a faded university hoodie that had seen better days. Her hair went up in a messy bun, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing, just pure survival mode. In her rush to get out the door, she grabbed her phone and keys but left her purse sitting right there on the kitchen counter. She didn't even realize it until much later. The drive to the office felt like it took forever, even though she was probably breaking a few speed limits. Her mind was racing through all the possible solutions, all the backup plans, all the people she needed to call. This wasn't just any regular problem. This was the kind of crisis that could make or break a company, and Jessica had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let everything crumble because of some technical failure. By the time she got to the office building, she'd been on conference calls for over an hour straight. Her throat was dry, her head was pounding, and she desperately needed coffee. There was a small cafe on the ground floor of the building, the kind of place that most people walked past without noticing. Nothing fancy, just a simple counter with a coffee machine and some pastries under glass domes. But right then it looked like heaven. She practically stumbled through the door, still half listening to her chief technology officer, explaining something about server redundancy and backup protocols. She nodded along, making her way to the counter, going through the familiar motions of ordering. Large coffee, black, and one of those blueberry muffins that were probably made yesterday, but she didn't care. The young guy behind the counter, probably a college student working part-time, gave her a sympathetic smile. He'd seen plenty of people stumble in looking half dead on a Monday morning. He rang up her order, and Jessica reached for her bag on instinct, her hand moving to where her purse usually hung on her shoulder. Nothing. Her hand grabbed at empty air. She patted her other side, checked her pockets, that familiar flutter of panic starting in her chest. No purse, no wallet, no cards. She must have looked completely lost standing there because the barista's expression changed from routine politeness to concern. Is everything okay?" he asked. Jessica felt her face getting hot. Here she was, supposedly a successful businesswoman, and she couldn't even pay for a cup of coffee. "I think I left my wallet at home," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can you just hold that order? I'll run to an ATM or something." But even as she said it, she knew there wasn't time. Every minute counted right now. She needed to get upstairs, needed to fix this disaster that was unfolding in real time. "Let me just try my phone," she said, pulling it out and opening her payment app. Maybe she'd linked a card to it, but when she tried to pay, the screen just showed an error message. Of course, nothing was going right today. "Sorry, it's not working," she said, feeling completely defeated. "Just cancel the order, I'm really sorry." She started to back away from the counter, feeling embarrassed and frustrated and just completely overwhelmed by everything. It was such a small thing, just a coffee and a muffin, but somehow it felt like the final straw in an already terrible morning. "Hold on," a voice said from behind her. Jessica turned to see a man standing in line behind her. He was probably in his early 30s, wearing work clothes that had definitely seen some action. His jeans had dust on them, his boots looked heavy and worn, and his flannel shirt had paint stains scattered across it. He had kind eyes, though, the sort of face that looked like it smiled a lot even though he wasn't smiling exactly right then. More like he was concerned. "I've got it," he said simply, stepping forward. No, you don't have to do that," Jessica protested immediately. The last thing she needed was charity from a stranger. She was a CEO, for crying out loud, even if she didn't look like one right now. "It's just coffee," he said with a shrug, already pulling out his wallet. "We've all been there. Trust me, I've definitely had those mornings where everything goes wrong." The barista looked between them, unsure what to do. Jessica wanted to argue more, but her phone buzzed again with another urgent message, and she could feel the seconds ticking away. She needed to get upstairs. The servers were still down. This crisis wasn't going to solve itself. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice quieter now. "Really, thank you. But please, let me pay you back. This is incredibly kind, but I can't just take your money." The man waved his hand dismissively as he handed his card to the barista. "Don't worry about it. Consider it a good deed for the day. Everyone needs a little help sometimes." "No, seriously," Jessica insisted. She wasn't used to being on this side of things. She was used to being the one helping others, making things happen, solving problems. This role reversal felt strange and uncomfortable. "Give me your number or something, I'll send you the money back." He hesitated, looking like he wanted to just walk away and forget about it. But Jessica must have had a particularly desperate look on her face because he finally sighed and reached for a napkin from the dispenser on the counter. "All right, if it makes you feel better," he said, grabbing a pen that the barista offered him. He scribbled something on the napkin and handed it to her. "But honestly, you don't have to. Just pay it forward someday." Jessica looked down at the napkin. His handwriting was a bit messy but readable. A name, David, and a phone number underneath. Simple and straightforward. "I'm Jessica," she said, meeting his eyes. "And I really do appreciate this more than you know. Today has been absolutely terrible, and this small kindness actually means a lot." David smiled then, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Well, I hope your day gets better, Jessica. Whatever's going wrong, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You look like someone who gets things done." If only he knew, Jessica thought. If only he knew that she ran a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, that she had over 300 employees depending on her, that right now those servers being down was probably costing more money every minute than most people made in a month. But she didn't say any of that. She just nodded, took her coffee and muffin from the counter and thanked him one more time. "Really, thank you, David. I'll be in touch," she said, carefully folding the napkin and putting it in her pocket. "Take care," he said, already ordering his own coffee. Jessica walked toward the elevator, taking a sip of the hot coffee and feeling it warm her from the inside. It was such a simple thing, such a small gesture, but somehow it made the whole morning feel a little less overwhelming. Someone had been kind to her without wanting anything in return, without knowing who she was or what she could do for them. Just pure, simple human kindness. As the elevator doors closed and she started heading up to her office on the 23rd floor, she pulled out the napkin again and looked at the phone number. She would definitely pay him back. And maybe if she ever got through this disaster of a day, she'd thank him properly. She had no idea then that this chance meeting, this declined card and a stranger's generosity, would end up changing everything. But for now, she had servers to fix and a company to save. The napkin went back in her pocket, and Jessica took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The server crisis took nearly 14 hours to completely resolve. By the time Jessica finally left the office that night, it was almost 9 o'clock. Her eyes burned from staring at screens, her back ached from hunching over laptops, and she was pretty sure she'd consumed enough coffee to power a small city. But they'd done it. The servers were back up, the data was secure, and the company had survived another disaster. She drove home in a daze, ordered takeout that she barely tasted, and collapsed on her couch still wearing those same old jeans and hoodie. It wasn't until she was mindlessly scrolling through her phone trying to unwind that she felt something crinkle in her pocket. The napkin. Jessica pulled it out and stared at the slightly crumpled paper with David's number scrawled across it. The guy from the cafe, the one who'd paid for her coffee when her card wouldn't work. It felt like that had happened days ago, not just this morning. So much had occurred in between that the memory almost seemed dreamlike, but she'd promised to pay him back. More than that, something about the encounter had stuck with her throughout the entire crazy day. In a world where people usually wanted something from her, where every interaction seemed to come with an agenda or an expectation, his simple kindness had been refreshing. He hadn't known who she was, hadn't tried to network or get her business card or pitch her some startup idea. He'd just helped because he could. Before she could overthink it, Jessica grabbed her phone and typed out a message. "Hi, David. This is Jessica from the cafe this morning. I wanted to thank you again for covering my coffee. Can I take you to dinner sometime this week to pay you back properly?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately wondered if that was too forward. Would he think she was asking him on a date? Was she asking him on a date? No, she was just being polite. Just returning a favor, that was all. Her phone buzzed faster than she expected. "Hey, glad your day got better. You really don't have to do that, but if you insist, I'm free Thursday evening." Jessica smiled. Thursday worked perfectly. She had a board meeting earlier that day, but it should wrap up by 5. "Thursday sounds great. Where would you like to meet?" "There's a diner near where I work. Nothing fancy, but the food's good and honest. Tony's place on 5th Street. 6:30? Jessica knew the area. It was definitely not her usual scene. Most of her business dinners happened at upscale restaurants with cloth napkins and wine lists thicker than novels. But something about meeting somewhere normal, somewhere without pretension, appealed to her. Perfect. See you then. The next few days passed in their usual blur of meetings, decisions, and putting out fires. Jessica ran a company that created software solutions for other businesses, and there was always something demanding her attention. Budget approvals, product launches, investor relations, hiring decisions. The list never ended. But Thursday evening, she found herself actually looking forward to dinner. She left the office at 5:30, which was practically unheard of for her. Her assistant looked shocked when Jessica grabbed her bag and headed for the door. In her car, Jessica faced a dilemma she hadn't anticipated. What did she wear? She'd started to change into something more casual, but then stopped. Her closet at the office had backup outfits, but they were all business attire. Tailored pants, silk blouses, blazers. The kind of clothes that screamed executive. She didn't want that tonight. She wanted to just be Jessica, not Jessica Chen, CEO of Tech Vista Solutions, not the woman whose face appeared in business magazines and tech conferences. Just a regular person having dinner with someone who'd done something nice for her. So she stayed in what she was wearing, simple black pants and a comfortable sweater. No jewelry except small earrings. She even left her designer bag in the trunk and grabbed an older, more casual purse. It felt strange, almost like she was going undercover in her own life. Tony's place turned out to be exactly what she expected. A classic American diner with red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and a jukebox in the corner that probably still worked. The smell of burgers and coffee filled the air, and she could hear the sizzle of the grill from the kitchen. David was already there, sitting in a booth near the window. He'd clearly cleaned up after work. His hair was damp like he'd just showered, and he wore a clean button-down shirt instead of the paint-stained clothes from before. He waved when he saw her, that same easy smile on his face. "You made it," he said as she slid into the booth across from him. "Of course. I told you I'd pay you back," Jessica said, feeling herself relax already. There was something comfortable about him, something that didn't make her feel like she had to be on all the time. "How'd the rest of your day go?" "You looked pretty stressed that morning," Jessica laughed. "That's putting it mildly. Work emergency, but we got it sorted out. Crisis averted." "What kind of work do you do?" David asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Here was the moment. The moment where she usually either had to lie or watch people's entire demeanor change when they found out who she was. She decided to split the difference. "I work in tech, software stuff. Pretty boring, honestly. What about you?" "Those looked like work clothes the other day." David nodded. "Construction. I work for a company that does commercial buildings mostly. Office buildings, retail spaces, that kind of thing. Been doing it for about 8 years now." The waitress came by and they ordered. David got a burger and fries without even looking at the menu, clearly a regular. Jessica ordered a club sandwich, suddenly realizing she was actually hungry for the first time in days. 8 years, that's solid. "Do you like it?" Jessica asked. David's face lit up in a way that told her the answer before he even spoke. "I love it, actually. There's something really satisfying about building things, you know? You start with nothing, just an empty lot or a bare frame, and then you create something real. Something people will use every day. I know it probably sounds simple, but it matters to me." "That doesn't sound simple at all," Jessica said softly. "It sounds meaningful." They talked easily after that. David told her about his younger sister who was in her 3rd year of college, studying to be a teacher. He was helping pay for her tuition because their parents had passed away a few years back in a car accident. He said it matter-of-factly, not looking for sympathy, just explaining why he worked so much overtime. "She's the smart one in the family," he said with obvious pride. "Always has been. I was never great at school, but I'm good with my hands. Building things makes sense to me, but her, she's going to change kids' lives someday." Jessica found herself genuinely moved. Here was someone working multiple overtime shifts to give his sister opportunities, and he talked about it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "That's really admirable," she said. "Not everyone would do that." David shrugged. "She's family. That's what you do. Do you ever think about doing your own thing?" Jessica asked. "Starting your own construction company?" His eyes flickered with something, excitement maybe, or hope, before he tamped it down. "Sometimes. I think about it a lot, actually. I've been putting money aside, learning the business side of things. But it's scary, taking that leap. Right now I've got steady work, good benefits. Starting from scratch means risking everything." Jessica understood that fear more than he knew. She'd been there herself years ago, deciding whether to leave her secure job to start her own company. The sleepless nights, the constant doubt, the feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff wondering if you should jump. "It is scary," she agreed, "but sometimes the scariest things are the most worth doing." "You sound like you're speaking from experience," David said, studying her face. "Maybe a little," Jessica said with a small smile. "I took a big risk once with my career. It worked out, but there were definitely moments where I wasn't sure it would." The food arrived and they kept talking. David asked about her family, and she told him about her parents who still lived in California, who'd immigrated before she was born and worked multiple jobs to give her opportunities. She kept things vague about her current life, but the core truths were there. Time passed without her noticing. Before she knew it, 2 hours had gone by. The diner had mostly cleared out, and they were one of the last tables still occupied. "I should probably let you go," David said, glancing at his watch. "I've got an early start tomorrow. We're pouring foundation at 6. Jessica nodded, feeling oddly reluctant for the evening to end. When the check came, she grabbed it quickly. "My treat, remember?" "Next time I'm paying," David said. "Next time." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. As they walked out to the parking lot, David hesitated by his truck, an older model that had definitely seen better days but looked well-maintained. "This was really nice," he said. "Thanks for dinner. And for the company." "Thank you for the coffee," Jessica replied. "And for reminding me that there are still good people in the world." She drove home that night feeling lighter than she had in months. No business talk, no networking, no strategic conversations. Just two people sharing a meal and getting to know each other. It was so simple, and yet somehow it felt important. When she got home, she found herself hoping Thursday wouldn't be the last time they met. And judging by the text that came through an hour later, David felt the same way. "Had a great time tonight. Maybe we could do this again sometime?" Jessica smiled at her phone and typed back immediately. "I'd really like that." Over the next 3 weeks, Jessica and David fell into an easy rhythm. They'd meet for coffee before his work shift started, grab lunch at food trucks near construction sites, or have dinner at casual places where nobody knew her face. And that was exactly what made it special. When she was with David, Jessica wasn't the CEO who had to have all the answers. She was just someone who laughed at his stories, listened to his dreams, and felt genuinely seen for who she was underneath all the titles and responsibilities. But the lie, or rather the omission, was starting to weigh on her. Every time David talked about his goals, about wanting to start his own construction business someday, Jessica had to bite her tongue. She wanted to give him advice, real concrete advice from someone who'd built a company from nothing. She wanted to tell him about the mistakes she'd made, the lessons she'd learned, the shortcuts that actually worked and the ones that didn't. Instead, she'd carefully phrase things as if she'd heard them from somewhere else. I read an article once that said, or a friend of mine who runs a business mentioned, became her go-to phrases. It felt dishonest, even though technically she wasn't lying. She just wasn't telling the whole truth. The thing was, the more time she spent with David, the more she realized this was becoming something real. This wasn't just paying back a coffee anymore. She looked forward to his texts. She caught herself smiling at random moments during board meetings because she'd remembered something funny he'd said. She actually left work at reasonable hours just so she could see him. Her assistant had noticed. "You seem different lately," Claire had mentioned one afternoon, a knowing smile on her face. "Happy, it's nice to see." Jessica had just shrugged it off, but Claire was right. She was happy and terrified because she knew this couldn't go on forever. Eventually, David would find out who she really was, and she had no idea how he'd react. That reckoning came sooner than she expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and David had asked if she wanted to see something he was proud of. He'd been talking about this current project for weeks, how it was the biggest one he'd worked on, how the building was going to be something special. Of course, Jessica had said yes. She wanted to see his world, understand what made him light up when he talked about his work. They met at the construction site after lunch. David was waiting outside the temporary fencing, wearing his hard hat and safety vest, holding an extra set for her. "Welcome to my office," he said with a grin, helping her put on the vest and adjusting her hard hat. "It's not much to look at yet, but give us a few more months." Jessica followed him through the gate, her boots crunching on gravel and dirt. The skeleton of a large building rose up in front of them, steel beams and concrete forming the basic structure. Workers moved around like ants, each person knowing exactly what they needed to do. The sound of drilling, hammering, and machinery created a symphony of construction. "This is going to be a corporate office building," David explained, his voice full of enthusiasm. 8 floors, state-of-the-art everything. "The company that's moving in is apparently some big tech firm, Tech Vista something. I don't know much about them, but they must be doing pretty well to afford a building like this." Jessica's heart stopped. Tech Vista, her company. This was her building. She'd approved the plans 6 months ago, signed off on the construction contract, sat through dozens of meetings about timelines and budgets, and somehow in all of that it never occurred to her that David might be working on it. "You okay?" David asked, noticing her expression. "I know it's loud. We can go somewhere quieter if you want." "No, I'm fine," Jessica managed to say, her mind racing. Just taking it all in, she should tell him. Right now. Right here. Just say it. But the words stuck in her throat. David walked her through the site, pointing out different areas. "This is going to be the main lobby. Huge windows, lots of natural light. And over here, the elevators. We're installing this really cool energy-efficient system." He was so proud, so excited to show her his work. And all Jessica could think about was how he'd react when he found out the truth. They made their way up a temporary stairwell to the 3rd floor, where the view of the city stretched out through the open framework. David leaned against a support beam, looking out at the skyline. "You know what I love about this?" he said. "In a few months, people are going to come to work here every day. They'll have meetings, celebrate promotions, maybe even meet their future spouse at the coffee machine. And I got to be part of building the place where all that life happens. That means something to me." Jessica stood next to him, feeling like the worst person in the world. Here he was, pouring his heart out about working on her building, and she hadn't told him it was hers. "David, I need to tell you something," she started. But before she could continue, a voice called out from below. "Ms. Chen, is that you up there?" Jessica's blood ran cold. She looked down to see Robert, her director of facilities, walking through the construction site with 2 other people from her team. They must have come for a progress inspection. "Ms. Chen," Robert called again, waving. "We weren't expecting you today. Do you want to join us for the walkthrough?" David's face changed. The warmth and openness that had been there moments before shifted to confusion. "Miss Chen?" he repeated quietly, looking at her. "Jessica Chen," Robert continued, now close enough that she could see his face clearly. He looked between her and David, clearly not understanding the tension. "The CEO? We have the 3rd quarter review meeting scheduled for next week to go over the building progress." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever, even though it was probably only a few seconds. Jessica watched David's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked a lot like betrayal. "CEO," David said, not as a question but as a statement. "You're the CEO of Tech Vista, the company that owns this building, the company I've been telling you about for weeks." "David, I can explain," Jessica started, but he was already stepping back, shaking his head. "You let me go on and on about this project, about how big it was for me to work on something like this, and the whole time it was your building, your company." "I wanted to tell you," Jessica said, very aware that Robert and her team were now standing awkwardly nearby, clearly having realized they'd walked into something. "I just didn't know how. How about the truth?" David's voice wasn't angry exactly. It was worse than that. It was hurt. How about at any point in the last 3 weeks you could have just been honest with me? I didn't want you to see me differently, Jessica said, feeling desperate now. Everyone treats me differently when they know. They stop being real. They start seeing the company, the money, the position. I just wanted someone to see me. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. See you? Jessica, I don't even know who you are. I thought I did. I thought you were just this normal person who worked in tech. Someone real. Someone genuine. But this? He gestured at the building, at Robert and her team. This is something else entirely. I'm still the same person, Jessica said softly. Are you? David asked. Because the person I thought I knew wouldn't have lied to me for weeks. Was this all just some kind of game to you? Some kind of experiment to see how regular people live? Was I just entertainment? A charity case you felt sorry for? No, Jessica said firmly. David, no. That's not what this was at all. What we have, it's real. My feelings are real. But you weren't real with me, David said. That's the problem. You had so many chances to tell me the truth and you chose not to. Every single time. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ms. Chen, we can come back another time if this is a bad moment. It's fine, David said before Jessica could respond. I was just showing a friend around, but I need to get back to work now. He looked at Jessica one more time and the hurt in his eyes was almost unbearable. I think you should go. David, please, Jessica said. I need some time, he said quietly. I need to think about this, about all of it. He turned and walked away, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. Jessica stood there, frozen, watching him disappear down the stairwell. Around her, the sounds of construction continued, completely indifferent to the fact that her heart was breaking. Robert approached carefully. Ms. Chen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. We can reschedule the walkthrough, Jessica nodded numbly. Yes, please, I need to go. She made her way out of the building in a daze, barely remembering to take off the hard hat and vest. In her car, she sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at the construction site through the windshield. She'd been so careful to protect herself, to keep her world separate, that she'd ended up hurting the one person who'd made her feel like herself in years. Her phone buzzed. For a hopeful second, she thought it might be David, but it was just Claire, asking about a meeting tomorrow. Jessica drove back to her office, but for the first time in her career, she couldn't focus on work. All she could think about was the look on David's face when he'd realized she'd been hiding who she was. The hurt, the betrayal, the feeling that everything between them had been built on a lie. She'd wanted to be seen for who she really was. But in hiding half of herself, she'd lost the chance to be seen at all. That night, Jessica sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone, wanting to call him, but knowing he'd asked for time. The irony wasn't lost on her. She ran a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. She'd built something from nothing, but she couldn't fix this. She couldn't strategize her way out of hurt feelings. And for once in her life, Jessica Chen had absolutely no idea what to do next. 3 days passed without a word from David. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Jessica threw herself into work like she always did when things got difficult. But this time it didn't help. She sat through meetings without really hearing what was being said. She approved budgets without her usual careful scrutiny. Claire had to remind her about appointments twice, which never happened. You should call him, Claire finally said on the 4th day, setting down a cup of tea on Jessica's desk. Not coffee, tea. The kind you drink when you need comfort. Not energy. He asked for time, Jessica replied, staring at her computer screen without seeing it. He also deserves an explanation that isn't shouted across a construction site in front of your employees, Claire pointed out gently. She'd worked for Jessica for 5 years and knew her well enough to push when pushing was needed. Jessica knew she was right. But every time she picked up her phone to text David, the words felt inadequate. How do you apologize for hiding who you are? How do you explain that you were so tired of being seen as a position, rather than a person, that you'd rather lie by omission than risk losing something real? That evening, Jessica did something she hadn't done in months. She left work at 5, went home, and actually sat down to think instead of just doing. She made herself dinner, simple pasta with vegetables, and sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and pen. If she couldn't find the right words to text, maybe she could write them. She started writing and didn't stop for 2 hours. Everything poured out onto the pages. How she'd felt that morning at the cafe, so overwhelmed and defeated. How his simple kindness had reminded her that good people still existed. How scared she'd been when they started getting closer because she knew the truth would eventually complicate everything. How every time someone found out she was a CEO, they changed. They became calculating or overly impressed or started treating her like a business opportunity instead of a person. She wrote about her fears and her loneliness, about how success had brought her everything except someone who wanted to know her, not what she could do for them. She wrote about how being with him had felt like breathing fresh air after years of being in a stuffy room, and she wrote about how sorry she was. Not just sorry for not telling him, but sorry for not trusting that what they had was strong enough to survive the truth. When she finally finished, her hand was cramping, and she'd gone through 8 pages. She read it over once, then carefully tore the pages from the notebook and folded them. The next morning, she'd figure out how to get them to him, but before she could, her phone rang. It was almost 10 at night, and the caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Jessica? It's David. Her heart jumped. David, hi, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. There was a long pause. Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting to call, but I've been thinking a lot the last few days, and I figured we should probably talk. I'd like that, Jessica said carefully. I'd really like that. There's a park near the construction site. Miller Park, do you know it? I can find it. Tomorrow evening? 6 o'clock? There are benches by the pond. I'll be there, Jessica promised. After they hung up, she sat holding her phone, her heart pounding. He wanted to talk. That was good, right? Or was this going to be him officially ending whatever had been building between them? She had no idea, and the uncertainty kept her awake most of the night. The next day crawled by at an agonizing pace. Jessica canceled her afternoon meetings, claiming she needed to handle something personal. Claire just smiled knowingly and told her to go, that everything here would be fine. Jessica arrived at Miller Park 15 minutes early. It was a nice place, the kind of neighborhood park with old trees and a small pond where ducks paddled around looking for handouts. She found the benches by the water and sat down, the letter she'd written folded in her jacket pocket. David arrived exactly at 6. He was wearing regular clothes, jeans, and a hoodie, and he looked tired. Like maybe he hadn't been sleeping great either. He sat down on the bench, leaving a careful distance between them. Thanks for coming, he said, looking out at the pond instead of at her. Thanks for calling, Jessica replied. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, David admitted. I was pretty angry. Felt like an idiot, honestly, going on about this big important building project to the actual person who owns the building, talking about my dreams of starting a business to someone who'd already done it, and was probably laughing inside at how naive I sounded. I was never laughing, Jessica said firmly. Not once, not ever. David, everything you told me about your dreams, about wanting to build your own company, I took that seriously. I wanted to help. I wanted to tell you about my own experience so badly, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? David asked, finally turning to look at her. Jessica took a breath. Afraid that you'd stop seeing me as Jessica and start seeing me as Jessica Chen, CEO. It happens every single time. People find out what I do and suddenly I'm not a person anymore. I'm an opportunity. A connection. Someone who might be useful. Or they get intimidated and pull away because they think we're from different worlds. I just wanted someone to know me without all of that in the way. But it was in the way, David said quietly. You just hid it instead of trusting me with it. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, David. I handled this terribly. They sat in silence for a moment, watching a duck dive under the water and pop back up with something in its beak. Can I ask you something? David said. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Anything. That first day at the cafe, when I paid for your coffee, did you actually forget your wallet, or was that some kind of test, some kind of social experiment? Jessica looked at him, shocked. What? No, David, I really did forget my wallet. I was in the middle of the worst crisis my company had faced in years. Our entire server system had crashed during the night. I literally rolled out of bed, threw on whatever clothes were closest, and ran out the door. I didn't even realize I'd left my purse until I went to pay. That was completely real. David studied her face, seeming to search for any sign of deception. Okay, I needed to know that. Because if this whole thing had been some kind of rich person playing pretend, I don't think I could have forgiven that. It wasn't, Jessica said earnestly. Meeting you, getting to know you, all of it was real. The only thing that wasn't real was me pretending I was someone less than I am. And I know that sounds arrogant, but I don't mean it like that. I mean, I hid a huge part of my life because I was scared of losing what we were building. David nodded slowly. I get why you did it. I mean, I don't love it, but I get it. And I've been thinking about what you said at the construction site, about how everyone treats you differently when they find out. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to treat you differently because you're successful. But, Jessica could hear the unspoken word hanging in the air. But I need to be able to trust you, David said. And right now I'm not sure I do. Not completely. Because if you could hide something that big for 3 weeks, what else might you not tell me? Jessica reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded letter. I wrote you something. Last night. It's probably too long and definitely too emotional, but it's everything I've been feeling, everything I should have said from the beginning. David took the pages, unfolding them carefully. Can I read this later? When I'm alone? Of course. He tucked the letter into his own jacket pocket. I don't know what happens next, Jessica. I don't know if we can get back to where we were. I don't either, Jessica admitted. But I'd like to try. Not as CEO to construction worker. Not as some kind of unequal thing. Just as two people who met in a cafe and felt something real. Because it was real, David. At least for me, it was the most real thing I've felt in years. David was quiet for a long time. So long that Jessica thought maybe he wasn't going to respond. Then he said, My sister wants to meet you. Jessica blinked, surprised by the change in direction. Your sister? I told her about you. Before all this happened. Told her I'd met someone who made me laugh, who listened when I talked, who seemed to actually care about the things I cared about. She said I sounded happier than I had in years. David smiled slightly. Then I had to tell her about the whole CEO revelation, and she called me an idiot. She called you an idiot? Jessica asked, confused. She said that if you'd wanted to hide who you were, you probably had a good reason. That women, especially successful women, deal with a lot of garbage from people who can't handle their success. She told me to stop being so focused on my pride and think about why you might have been scared to tell me. Jessica felt tears prickling at her eyes. Your sister sounds pretty smart. She is. Annoyingly so. David turned to face Jessica fully now. Look, I'm still hurt. I'm still working through the trust thing, but I don't want to throw away something good because I'm too stubborn to try to understand your side. So what do? Jessica asked. We start over. Kind of. We keep getting to know each other, but this time with all the cards on the table. No hiding, no pretending. You tell me about your world, I tell you about mine, and we figure out if those worlds can fit together. I'd like that, Jessica said softly. But I have one condition, David added. What's that? Next time you offer to buy me dinner, we're not going to Tony's, we're going somewhere fancy. Since apparently you can actually afford it. Jessica laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in days. Deal, anywhere you want. And you have to teach me how you did it, David continued. How you built your company. Because I'm serious about starting my own business someday, and if I've got access to someone who's actually done it successfully, I'd be an idiot not to learn from her. I can do that, Jessica said. I'd actually love to do that. David stood up, offering his hand. So hi, I'm David. I'm a construction worker with dreams of running my own company someday. I'm supporting my sister through college. I drink way too much coffee, and I'm terrible at cooking anything that doesn't come with instructions on the box. Jessica took his hand, standing to face him. Hi David, I'm Jessica. I'm the CEO of a tech company. I work too many hours. I forgot what hobbies were about 5 years ago. And I'm apparently really bad at honest communication when I'm scared. Nice to meet you. Jessica, David said, and this time when he smiled, it reached his eyes. Nice to meet you too, David. It wasn't quite the same as before. There was still healing that needed to happen, trust that needed to be rebuilt. But standing there in the park as the sun started to set, Jessica felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe they could make this work after all. Starting over was harder than either of them expected, but also better in ways they hadn't anticipated. The first few weeks were careful. They both seemed to be walking on eggshells, testing the waters, figuring out how to be honest without overwhelming each other. David asked questions about her company, and Jessica answered them fully this time, not hiding behind vague statements. She told him about the early days, sleeping on an air mattress in a tiny office, living on instant noodles and pure determination. She told him about the first time she almost went bankrupt, the investor who believed in her when nobody else did, the moment when she realized her company was actually going to make it. And David listened, really listened, asking smart questions that showed he understood more about business than he gave himself credit for. In return, Jessica got to see his world properly. She visited construction sites without hiding who she was, wearing her professional clothes and actually being introduced as the client. She watched David work, saw how his crew respected him, how he could look at a problem and find practical solutions that made everyone's job easier. She began to understand why he loved what he did. There was an art to it, a satisfaction in building something solid and real with your own two hands. 2 months after their conversation in the park, David invited her to Sunday dinner at his place. His sister was going to be there, and Jessica was terrified. She'd face down hostile investors and difficult board meetings without breaking a sweat. But the thought of meeting David's sister made her genuinely nervous. "She's going to grill you," David had warned with a grin. "Fair warning, she's protective." "I can handle protective," Jessica had replied, trying to sound confident. David's apartment was small but neat, the kind of place where everything had its spot because there wasn't room for clutter. His sister arrived right after Jessica, bounding through the door with the kind of energy that filled a room. "You must be Jessica," she said, not waiting for an introduction. "I'm Riley, and before we do any of the polite small talk, I just want to say thank you." Jessica blinked, surprised. "Thank you? For what?" "For making my brother smile again," Riley said simply. "After our parents died, he kind of forgot how to do that for a while. But these last few months, even with all the drama, he's been different, lighter. So thank you for that." Jessica felt her throat tighten with emotion. "He makes me smile too." Dinner was chaotic and wonderful. Riley told embarrassing stories about David as a kid. David threatened to reveal equally embarrassing stories about Riley, and Jessica laughed more than she had in months. At one point, Riley started asking Jessica for business advice, pulling out her laptop to show her a non-profit idea she'd been working on for underprivileged students. "I want to create a tutoring program," Riley explained, her eyes bright with passion. "But I have no idea how to actually structure it, get funding, make it sustainable. I've just been kind of winging it." Jessica spent the next hour walking Riley through the basics, drawing diagrams on napkins explaining how to write a business plan and approach potential donors. David watched from the kitchen where he was doing dishes, a soft smile on his face. "What?" Jessica asked when she caught him looking. "Nothing. Just watching you in your element. It's pretty amazing, actually." After Riley left, Jessica helped David finish cleaning up. They worked in comfortable silence for a while before David spoke. "I've been thinking about something," he said, drying a plate. "And I want to run it by you, get your honest opinion." "Okay," Jessica said, putting away the last of the glasses. "I've been saving money for years to start my own company, and I think I'm finally ready. Actually ready, not just dreaming about it. But there's this opportunity that came up, and I need to make a decision soon." He explained that the construction company he worked for was looking to sell off one of their smaller divisions, the residential construction side. It was struggling, not making much profit, but it had potential. David thought he could turn it around, make it into something special. "It's more expensive than starting completely from scratch," he admitted. "But it comes with existing contracts, equipment, and a small crew. The infrastructure is already there. I just need to rebrand it, restructure some things, and actually care about quality instead of just churning out cookie-cutter houses." "What's holding you back?" Jessica asked, though she thought she knew. "Fear, mostly. It's everything I've saved. If it fails, I'm starting over from zero. And there's Riley's tuition to think about. I can't let her drop out because I took a stupid risk." Jessica sat down at his small kitchen table, thinking carefully about what to say. This was the moment she'd wanted for months, the chance to actually help him with real advice, not just vague suggestions. "Can I be completely honest with you?" she asked. "Please. I think you should do it. But not blindly. You need to see there, Books first really dig into why that division is struggling. Is it poor management? Bad contracts? Lack of investment? If it's fixable problems, then you're getting a head start instead of building from nothing. But if the foundation is rotten, no amount of renovation will save it. David nodded, listening intently. And about Riley's tuition, Jessica continued. I've been thinking about that too. My company has a scholarship program for students pursuing education degrees. It's merit-based, completely legitimate, and Riley would absolutely qualify. She could apply for next semester. Jessica, I can't let you just give my sister money, David said firmly. I'm not giving her anything. She'd have to apply like everyone else, submit transcripts, write an essay, the whole thing. I won't be involved in the selection process at all. But if she gets it, which I think she would based on what I've seen, it would take some pressure off you. Let you take the business risk without worrying about her education. David was quiet for a long moment. You really think I can do this? Build a successful company? I know you can, Jessica said. You've got everything it takes. Vision, work ethic, integrity, and practical skills. That's a better foundation than most entrepreneurs start with. I had the vision and work ethic, but I had to learn everything else the hard way. You're already ahead of where I was. 3 weeks later, David signed the papers. He was officially the owner of Rivera Construction, a name he'd chosen to honor his parents. Jessica was there when he got the keys to the office, watching his hands shake slightly as he unlocked the door to his own business for the first time. This is really happening, he said, sounding amazed. This is really happening, Jessica confirmed. Over the next several months, Jessica watched David transform. He threw himself into the business with everything he had, working longer hours than she did, which was saying something. But he was smart about it. When he needed advice, he asked. When he didn't understand something, he learned. And slowly, steadily, Rivera Construction started to grow. Jessica helped where she could, always careful to let it be his company, his decisions. She connected him with her accountant who specialized in small businesses. She introduced him to a few potential clients who needed residential work, but she never pushed, never tried to take over, just offered support when he needed it. The first time David landed a major contract on his own, completely independent of any connection to Jessica, he called her from the job site, practically shouting with excitement. We got it. The Patterson project. They chose us over 3 other companies. That's amazing, Jessica said, genuinely thrilled for him. I knew you could do it. I couldn't have done it without you, David said, his voice turning serious. Not just the business advice, but believing in me, giving me the confidence to try. You had that confidence already, Jessica replied. I just helped you see it. 6 months after David opened his company, Tech Vista's new building was finally complete. Jessica invited David to the grand opening, not as a contractor this time, but as her guest. They walked through the finished space together, and she could see the pride on his face as he pointed out work his old crew had done. Pretty nice office you've got here, he teased. It's okay, Jessica said with a smile. Though I hear the contractor who worked on it has really gone places, started his own successful company and everything. Well, he had a good teacher, David replied, taking her hand. They stood in the lobby, sunlight streaming through those huge windows David had told her about months ago. The building was filling, up with employees, life happening in the space he'd helped create. And Jessica realized something. She'd spent so much of her life trying to separate her professional success from her personal happiness, thinking they couldn't coexist. But standing there with David, she understood they didn't have to be separate. They could actually strengthen each other. I love you, she said suddenly. They hadn't said those words yet, both of them gun-shy about moving too fast after everything that had happened. David looked at her, surprise and joy spreading across his face. Yeah? Yeah, I love you. Not the construction worker who paid for my coffee. Not the entrepreneur I've been advising, just you. All of you.